Sandra del Castillo, PhD, is a teacher, ritual artist, dream guide, and mentor specializing in Mesoamerican mythology and the Mexican Day of the Dead. She earned her PhD in Jungian and archetypal depth psychology at Pacifica Graduate Institute, where she teaches adjunct. Sandra lectures, leads workshops, and is a practicing curandera. She's the creator and host of Blue Medicine Journal, a Jungian podcast imagining the world through myth, dreams, and ritual art. Storytelling and Conversations in the Kairos, Blue Medicine Journal is a podcast dedicated to soul tending, reenchantment, and reimagining life on our earth. Dr. Sandra del Castillo, welcome. Thank you for joining us today, and I'm going to hand things over to you now.
Thanks so much, Kristen and Kelly and all the lovely family at PRS. I'm really happy to be here, even if it's just via our Zoom here. And thanks everybody for joining me this morning at this lovely juncture, this time of the year. I'm not going to. I'm going to really sort of dive in because I have a lot to share, and then I just want to let you know that at the end there'll be time for questions and answers, but I'm going to present first, okay? So I just want to start. And I'm going to start with one of my favorite poems, and it's by Rumi, but it's just, this time of the year, it's just poignant. The breezes at dawn have secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep. People are going back and forth across the door sill where the two worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. 'Tis the season. Let me see. Okay, great. Halloween, Samhain, All Hallows Day, All Souls Day, and the Day of the Dead, La Noche de los Muertos, all of these upon us, yeah? So the mythic underworld stirs, and enchantment settles over the land. Small children feel it. I know many of you do. When the spirits of the trees take on a formidable presence in the darkness, the ancestors visit in dreams. There's an eerie tingling at twilight and a llamada at dawn, a calling at dawn. Scarecrows sag in the fields, and the ravens and crows are bien escandalosas. Our craving for the supernatural this time of year is natural because it's in nature and we are nature. We're going to seek stories that give expression to those things that we feel lingering in the darkness. The ancient myths and traditions venerate the ancestors with the harvest. They cross centuries and borders to find new life. Fairy tales and folklore abound. Ghosts, goblins, monsters, and vampires parade on earth. Witches cackle on broomsticks. Spells are cast and cauldrons bubble. La Catrina does a zapateada to wake the dead. And the songs of La Llorona and La Bruja call out again and again to be played, be played. The strings of the guitar and the jarana reach into the soul, beckoning us into the mystery, and we follow with a longing. The crescendo is reached when for a few precious nights, our ancestors return. Smiling jack-o'-lanterns still welcome them home and keep the goblins at bay. Likewise, a sea of marigolds and candlelight greet the ancestors with the fragrance of burning copal, sugar skulls, pan de muertos, and homemade fruit punch, served hot and usually spiked to keep the body warm in the chilly graveyard and the spirits high. I still recall my mother's very simple ofrenda as a small child, and the power that the flickering candlelight held to soothe my fears, conjure awe, and invoke the sacred mystery that prevails this time of year. People are going back and forth across the door sill where the two worlds touch. Don't go back to sleep. Children of all ages love ghost stories. And La Llorona is a classic dating back to colonial Mexico with its roots extending into Mesoamerica. And as this presentation shows, La Llorona appears to have a life of her own. She shapeshifts with the zeitgeists and the worldviews. This is not unusual for archetypal figures while they maintain their essence, especially those in Mesoamerica. In today's presentation, I begin with the story of La Llorona that many of us were raised with, or know today. Then I reach back in time to introduce her Mesoamerican manifestations. And lastly, drawing from these two, I propose a third. La Llorona is Lady Blue in her manifestations today and her significance. So this story that I begin with is, I adapted it from the Jungian analyst Clarissa Pinkola Estes. Once upon a time, a Spanish nobleman rode through the town. His fine black horse was shiny and strong. It trotted with a pride that surely he had inherited from its owner. For the Hidalgo was a proud man, and though he was handsome, his heart was closed. The sun was setting, and the vendors in the marketplace were packing up their wares. Among them was Marina, a beautiful young maiden, the color of cinnamon. When the Hidalgo spotted her, he was smitten. And then and there, he decided he would have her for the mother of his sons. And so he waited. And the moment that the young maiden walked away from the market, he swooped her off her feet and carried her away, screaming, to his hacienda in the distance. Marina was a humble woman from the campo. If she tried to escape, he would kill her surely. And even if she did, who would have her now? What man? Would her family even welcome her back? There was no turning back for Marina. And so, without the benefits of marriage, she lived with Hidalgo and soon bore him two sons. One was a baby and the other a toddler when the nobleman announced, out of the blue, that his parents had found him a Spanish noblewoman. So he was going to Spain to marry her. And he would be taking the boys with him. Marina stood frozen, utter disbelief washing over her. She tried to take it in. What locura was this? What madness possessed the Gallego? None of it made sense. And yet there he stood, aloof and resolute. She stood paralyzed as a freezing chill swept over her. A fury began growing inside her, pushing through her entire being, rising up and up until it found its way out in a long, shrill howl, like the howling of a wounded coyote in the night. She wailed and convulsed, and in her rage began tearing out her hair. The nobleman's blood ran cold as he watched aghast. In that moment, Marina caught his gaze, the blue eyes studying her in horror. Now it was her turn to be aghast, outraged, his inability to grasp her feelings. And then suddenly, in the tradition of formidable screeching woman gone mad everywhere, she charged him, pulling his hair, scratching at his eyes, and clawing at his face. The Hidalgo began yelling and wrestling to free himself from her. Finally, he gave her a hard shove, and her small frame fell to the ground. Bleeding from his nose, the Hidalgo stomped off to get away from the flailing woman and tend to his wounds. It was the screams of her babies that sent Marina scrambling to her feet. And rushing to their room, she grabbed both of them in her arms and then ran like the wind, out the door, through the patio, into the fields, and straight to the raging river. When the nobleman noticed the silence, he rushed to the boy's room, and finding it empty and Marina nowhere to be seen, he wasted no time. Jumping on his horse, he went galloping after her and the boys. The sound of the horse's hooves pounding the earth sent Marina into utter panic. Her bare feet seemed barely to skim the earth, and she fled in horror, howling and clutching her babies, screaming. She had reached the levee when the horse was on her heels, snorting and whinnying and lifting its front legs. The hidalgo was yelling something she couldn't make out, and in that maelstrom, Marina lifted the boys and with all her might flung them into the raging torrent. Their horror echoed in their screams, and then nothing. Time stood still. And then a shrill shriek rose like an otherworldly howl from the center of the earth. It was Marina. The young mother's heart burst wide open, and she collapsed, toppling down to the riverbank, dead. The nobleman returned to Spain and married his rich noblewoman, and Marina went to heaven, where the guardian of the gate told her, "You have suffered, Marina, so you can enter. But first you must recover the souls of your dead children and bring them to me." At that, Marina howled. And so it was. With that terrible edict, Marina became La Llorona, a pale, wailing ghost, fated to wander riverbanks and lake shores forever, sweeping the shorelines with her long hair and dredging river bottoms with her skeleton fingers, always searching, always wailing for her lost children. Ay, mis hijos! The story of La Llorona gives expression to the eerie that characterizes the season. It is a beware to children everywhere. The veils are open. Ghosts and boogeymen wander the earth. Get home before dark, or La Llorona will take you forever as one of her own. The symbolism of the water is important in this version of La Llorona. She haunts the riverbanks, lake shores, and wells. Bodies of water symbolize the unconscious in Jungian thought, both the personal and collective, oceans in particular. They depict portals, the deep and dark fluid realms of the soul, teeming with mystery and archetypal energies. La Llorona travels these realms, arriving from the collective unconscious to the personal through the images and stories that come with the season. The weeping woman archetype shapeshifts to match the spirit of the season, the spirit of the time, the spirit of the depths. Some things remain the same, while inherent qualities may be lost, as I show in this presentation. Here, La Llorona is framed within the post-conquest Spanish Catholic colonial worldview. This story speaks to the plight of women within that patriarchal framework, where the divine feminine was disappeared and women became subservient to a male who birthed them from his ribs. La Llorona cannot accept her fate as an abandoned woman with no future, and so in her rage and anguish at the unspeakable injustice, she goes mad. In essence, La Llorona becomes a negative mother archetype who kills her own children. She is at once victim and villain. So for those who want to delve deeper into this theme, I explore La Llorona in relationship to childbirth and the postpartum blues and postpartum psychosis in the first season of my podcast, Blue Medicine Journal. In this presentation, however, time doesn't allow. allow. So as I show, this version of La Llorona is very different from her Mesoamerican predecessors, though her cries remain an ominous and otherworldly warning. So I'd like to say a word about the ancient stories before I delve into the Mesoamerican. In Jungian thought, the ancient stories, myths, rituals, fairy tales, dreams, symbols, traditions, these are considered the transformative language of the soul. They give image to the unique forces, styles, and qualities of consciousness, the instincts and urges of the season. As Jung pointed out, when myths are read or ritually reenacted, they spring to life like living blueprints. They guide, compensate, and correct our otherwise limited consciousness in meaningful ways. This is their power. As archetypal vessels, they link us not only to the forces that live within and without, they link us to our ancestors as well. Arising from the depths of the collective unconscious, the stories, myths, and tradition take on the clothing of a culture, right? And they're embedded in the world soul, just as we are. Plato called this the anima mundi. Like the Mesoamerican cosmovision, these ancient ensouled worldviews recognize the entire cosmos as conscious, communicative, and evolving. Every star, planet, and galaxy, every stone, flower, tree, insect, fauna, and fungi are embedded in soul, interrelated and interdependent. Despite centuries of repression of the ancient stories and traditions and worldviews, they persist because they are archetypal in nature. And so they spiral back around to take on new life, freeing us, poco a poco, from the spell of the Anthropocene. That is our modern, human-centric worldview, which is effectively cut off from nature and the anima mundi. And so we live in a disenchanted worldview. Humans are not one with the earth, but rather we have claimed dominion over the earth and all life on it. We alone are considered capable of intelligence and communication. And in the whole cosmos, humans alone possess soul. In this worldview, all the creatures and wonders of Mother Earth are natural resources, dead matter to be exploited or extracted. We can see that where this worldview has gotten us. In an effort to reclaim the world soul, Jung reintroduced the anima mundi to modernity through his mythologically informed, soul-centered depth psychology. To give birth to the ancient in a new time is creation, he said. That is the task, and that is salvation, and that redeems me. These are his words. And as I delve deeper into my research of Mesoamerican mythology, cosmovision, and philosophy, I find Jung's insight here deeply resonant. It informs my work and this presentation. In Mesoamerica, maternal figures played prominent roles in shaping societal values. In this context, childbirth was treated as a profound rite of passage. Labor took place on the metaphoric battlefield because birthing women risked death to give birth. And in this powerful act, women became warriors. Las Lloronas were the women who died during childbirth. And so they became minor deities. Their existence emphasized the idea that motherhood was both sacred and powerful, fraught with danger and sacrifice. For the Aztecs or Mexica people and the Nahuas, Las Lloronas were called the Cihuateteo. After death, these women warriors ascended to the heavens, where daily they carry the sun god on his royal litter from the zenith to the underworld at sunset. The Cihuateteo holds some essentials in common with Las Lloronas from the Purépecha pantheon of Michoacán, which is my ancestry. These weeping women archetypes were known both as the Ahuicanime and the Nana Cucú, which means the aunt goddesses, las tías diosas. The Ahuicanimes were associated with Sharatanga, whose image is here on the left, or at least my left. She's one of three lunar goddesses and the daughter of the mother goddess Quarahuaperi. Sharatanga became the crescent moon in order to help her mother make the earth fertile, including humans and animals. Sharatanga is patron to both the farmers who planted with her cycles and with pregnant women. And so when it happened that a birthing mother died during childbirth, the goddess took them up into her celestial court, where they became divine midwives. Thereafter, their roles lie in assisting the goddess with pregnant women from the conception of the fetus to childbirth, and included those crucial 40 days after, when a woman, after having given birth or given light, as it's called, still lies between worlds, and so requires special herbs and atoles, or the corn brules, and temazcales, the sweat lodges. And these allowed her to regain her strength and earthly grounding. There were specific prayers, hymns, and rituals to invoke the Ahuicanime during childbirth. And during labor, a woman's body embodies a between worlds consciousness, which is both powerful and dangerous. A birthing woman can even change the weather. The women who died in this liminal act were both greatly revered and feared. After death, the bodies of these women were closely guarded because their hair, fingernails, and garments were coveted by the young warriors who wanted to use them as talismans and relics and protection and power on the battlefield. The Ahuicanime had other powers as well, which they also held in common with the Cihuateteo. It was the powerful keening of the Ahuicanime that identified them as Las Lloronas. Their disembodied wails in the night were greatly feared because they were considered omens, warning of famine, calamities, destruction, or death. Whenever their cries were heard, the Purépecha gathered in the trojes, the little wooden huts, and holding hands, they chanted, and this is in timid chorus. That's right from the history of Michoacán, of the Relación de Michoacán, in timid chorus. And they pleaded with the Ahuicanime, don't do it, Aunt Goddess, don't do it. The ominous power of Las Lloronas' cries is shared with the Cihuateteo, Las Lloronas of the Aztec and Nahua people. It is written that a decade before the Spanish conquest, La Llorona's cries resounded throughout Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, and Mesoamerica. All who heard them feared for their lives, and rightly so. They were an omen, one of many, signaling the fall of the Aztec Empire and the end of the world as they knew it. Here, the wails of La Llorona foreshadowed the Spanish conquest, which means they warn of apocalypse, genocide, Holocaust, plague. Their repercussions reverberate even now, 500 years later. Ultimately, it could be argued that the cries of La Llorona also herald the birth of a new nation, Mexico as we know it today. As deities, Las Lloronas exist in the liminal space between life and death. That's where women also exist when they're giving birth. Once human, they are now celestial warriors and midwives, and they're linked with both the sun and the moon. The power of their llanto, their cries, warns villagers and nations of death, impending doom, and disaster. That said, this omniscience of Las Lloronas, resounding in her wails, are unique powers that have been buried in the colonial lore that we know today. Yet, because these powers, again, they're archetypal, so they arise anew, right? From the depths of the world soul and the collective unconscious, reaching us through these ancient images and stories. This next section is an ongoing exploration of La Llorona, the shape-shifting weeping woman archetype as Lady Blue. Drawing from her colonial and Mesoamerican manifestations, we consider La Llorona's significance today in light of the existential crisis, suffering, and grief, and its creative expression. We explore the taboo and power of the llanto, the wailing, and the notion of harnessing its power in this Kairos moment. Remember that Jung said image is psyche. Psyche is another word for soul. And so, in order to imagine deeper into La Llorona, we explore this liminal deity as Lady Blue through the color blue. As Goethe framed it, the blue surface seems to recede from us. It draws us after it. Consider cobalt blue glass in the sunlight, the Prussian blues of twilight, the indigos of midnight and deep space, the fluid blues coloring rivers, lakes, and oceans, the blues of the mythic underworld, of the Pleiades and the cosmos. Consider, too, all the gods and goddesses we have painted blue throughout history and across the globe. Krishna and Vishnu, the blue medicine Buddha, the rain gods Chupitiripime and Tlaloc, and the goddess Chalchutlique, also a patron of birth, to name a few. Blue is linked with eternity and with our dark nights of the soul. It colors our bruises and sorrows, the blues of the blues singers and jazz musicians, and Lady sings the blues of Billie Holiday, Edith Piaf, and Amy Winehouse, the blues that pierce the heart and soothe the soul, the blues of the coyotes who howl for their kindred, lost to the fires in the Southland, the blue tincture of alchemy that penetrates the darkness of the unconscious and finds its way to the heart, the celestial blues of the crescent moon goddess and her divine midwives, of the Siwateteo as they escort the sun god across the skies, and the haunting blues of La Llorona's ominous and disembodied wails in the night. These are the blues that paint Lady Blue. They give image to her liminality and the sacred threshold where she dwells between life and death, a sacred dimension where the celestial and underworld cohere with the blue earth via her bodies of water and women, the intrinsically feminine and the deep unconscious. People are going back and forth across the door sill where the two worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. We enter this season of the witch in a collective dark night of the soul, a dystopian end of times rivaling any bestseller. The world as we have known it comes crashing and burning to a brutal end. And as is the nature of things, another world waits to be born. Who births it and designs it and imagines it is in flux. To find meaning in the madness, we turn to myth, the language of the soul. As James Hillman put it, The soul is entangled in myths. To know, these are his words, to know ourselves, we must know the gods and goddesses of myth. We must face the gods. And so to understand our time in history through the mythologically informed Jungian depth psychology, I turn oh so briefly to the Aztec myth of the five suns. That's spelled S-U-N, right? Which means an era or worldview. Each sun is ruled by four sun gods, their brothers, who compete with one another for who's going to reign, yeah? Each of the suns is an archetypal force. Their unique styles, values, and qualities of consciousness form the worldview. The rising and falling of each of the suns gives image to the life, death, rebirth cycle revealed in nature. We can consider the end of a sun cycle the end of a world view and the collective perception of the self, which forms a consciousness. Metaphorically speaking, we are currently in the fifth sun. That said, when the fourth sun came to an end through flooding, the Aztec gods gathered in a similar darkness to the one we face today. And this is from the Historia de los Mexicanos. When all was yet in darkness, when yet no sun had shone and no dawn had broken, it is said, the gods gathered together and took counsel among themselves at Teotihuacan. In the story, they, the old gods, called for someone willing to do what was necessary. Who will carry the burden? Who will take it upon himself to be the sun, to bring the dawn? In keeping with this mythos, Jung foresaw our time in history as a kairos moment, an opportune moment for a metamorphosis of the gods, which means a change of the principles and symbols that define our anthropocentric worldview. This was in the late 1950s when he said this, when he became aware of a mood of destruction and renewal that permeated the West. Foreseeing the perils that we face today, like Gandalf to Frodo, he acknowledged that none of us have consciously chosen to live in this time. And he saw it as the expression of the unconscious human within us who is changing. He warned that future generations, that's us, would have to become conscious of this momentous transformation, or we could destroy ourselves through our technology and science. So much is at stake, he said, and so much depends on the psychological constitution of the modern human. So there you have it, the psychological constitution of the modern human. Okay, so that's collective, right? That's all of us together. So to quote Han Solo, now that's the real trick, isn't it? And so as the fifth sun comes to an end, the kairos becomes an omen and a call to consciousness. It's a Greek word. It means a portal, a golden fleeting moment, not unlike the cries of La Llorona. And like the Aztec gods gathering in the darkness between the worlds, there is work to be done, sacrifices to be made, and rituals to be performed if we are collectively to birth a new sun, a new and ancient archetypal and souled worldview. In this context, we consider the role grief plays in healing our psychological constitution, both personal and collective. Caroline Casey of the Visionary Activist Show makes an important distinction between grief and grievance. Grief is born in love, whereas grievance is unexpressed grief. Grievance feeds hate and fuels tyranny. These are her words. This is a packed notion. Grievance and hate are ubiquitous. Simply put, they define today's ruling political playbook. Divide and conquer. With so much turmoil and injustice, how do we express our grief and rage as an act of love and not fall into the poison of hate? Because it is poison. When you feel it, you know it. As the good Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. reminds us, I've decided to love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. I think that the yoga concept of Hridaya helps us understand love in this context. The Sanskrit word Hridaya can be understood as spiritual heart and center of consciousness. Or as my yoga instructor, Dar Vanderhoek, described it, it is the heart that is connected with all hearts, the universal heart, which includes more than human life. Contrary to our disenchanted worldview, we are not separate, but one, embodied in the world soul and universal heart. We were all born on this garden we call Earth, our tiny grain of sand in the cosmos, one people, one planet, one with all life. In 1854, Chief Seattle wrote, "All things are connected, like the blood that unites us all." Humankind did not weave the web of life. We are but one thread in it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together. All things connect. In this understanding, it is natural that we experience grief, disbelief, horror, and sorrow, and rage at the ravages of climate catastrophe, at the sea of tents of the hungry and unhoused, in the so-called richest country on the world, at the images of screaming babies and children ripped from their hardworking parents and brutalized by big yelling men in masks with guns, kidnapped so that private prisons may profit, the images of children dying from forced starvation and buried under the rubble of bombs, the reports of sex trafficked children hidden away by monsters in power, day after day, year after year. What happens to our grief and rage and the unaddressed trauma of those children and parents? How will it ripple forth, and for how long? How many generations? How many generations do we have? How will their souls be tended? Or how will the soul of our world at war be tended? Will humanity make it through this profound rite of passage? How long do we have? In the words of the Wicked Witch of the West, what a world, what a world. Our acts of kindness, volunteering, and activism make a difference. They spark hope and change and alleviate the soul, and there's so much good going on, so much creativity. Most of us do what we can, depending on our means and our psychological constitution. The question we might ask ourselves is, how do we creatively channel the grief and rage that lives inside at the colossal injustice so that it does not slip into grievance, feeding hate and fueling tyranny? How do we give voice to the llanto, that's the cry? And maybe more importantly, how do we channel its power as a collective call to consciousness? In Western modernity, only babies are allowed to scream and howl. Beyond that, crying is taboo, not only for women, but especially for men. We could see how that alone would fuel grievance. The drunk and mentally unstable break these taboos. Still, there is power in their wails, whether cathartic or ominous. I was in Mexico when Mario Moreno died. He's known around the world as Cantinflas. He was Mexico's beloved trickster tramp and one of Charlie Chaplin's contemporaries. It was pre-cell phone days, and on the cover of a newspaper was a black and white image of Cantinflas walking away from the camera, two suitcases in hand, his smiling face turning back to face the camera. It was poignant. As I walked through the marketplace that morning, feeling the grief, a man began wailing somewhere in the marketplace. It just rose up. Ay, se murió Cantinflas. Ay, Cantinflas has died. It was as if a moment of silence descended upon the bustling marketplace. The llanto had pierced our hearts. And this man, known as the town drunk, had effectively expressed our collective grief. There was a reverence to it, almost. Like the blues man who becomes the priest and confessor in the honky-tonk, or the keening of the Hmong grandmothers at funerals. As my sister described it, the Hmong grandmothers wail prayers and messages for the departed, which elicit an otherworldly sensation and cathartic release for the mourners. I recall my aunt's sudden shrill cry when my father died, piercing the stillness of the funeral chapel. My cousin gently ushered her out, but in that moment, it felt as if she had cried for all of us. Outside of these contexts, the taboo to wailing is universal. The cruelty and madness is just to be stoically endured. I heard a woman today who said, we're expected to smile and be nice. Nazis were nice, she said. They were the nicest people. Just turned their faces. Anyway, and yet when it erupts somewhere, depending on its shrill nature, the cry can signal a chilling and profound rupture, a breakdown as opposed to a breakthrough. It would depend on which La Llorona archetype is manifest. Is she the raging, anguished, colonial Llorona, tragic victim to a corporate patriarchal fantasy in a frenetic maelstrom and power grab at the end of time? Or is it a La Llorona who wails in the night for the earth and all beings, whose power is a cathartic call to consciousness, a wake-up call? The end is nigh, and as Jane Fonda put it, a new world beckons beyond the conflagration. I have found the cathartic nature of the llanto, and I like the word llanto because it goes beyond just the cry or the wail. For me, I can really feel that. So I have felt this cathartic nature of the llanto with sacred entheogens and in the sweat lodge. I once had the honor of participating in a sweat lodge at a pyramid site in Veracruz with the Abuela Margarita, may she rest in peace. I have called it La Llorona Sweat Lodge because in it, the Abuela encouraged us not only to cry, she invited us to wail for all our sorrows, both personal and collective. I went for it. I howled and cried, and following the lead of La Abuela, who did some powerful wailing herself, I cried like a baby in the safety of the Temazcal, the Earth Mother's womb. So did others, though not everyone. The keening together within that sacred space was deeply cathartic, a cleansing medicine for the heart, body, mind, and soul. It was something I had never experienced before or since. Breaking such a taboo is disturbing, even in ritual context. It's powerful, and I could see some participants were disturbed by it. Afterwards, I was approached by a kind man who seemed concerned, like somehow he wanted to fix my grief. He was an educated man, maybe, who knows, maybe a psychiatrist. But grief is not something that is fixed. It's something that is felt, that needs to be expressed, that looks for expression creatively. That expression is transformative. Plus, in terms of our psychological constitution, it avoids the festering that leads to bitterness and cynicism, or worse, becomes the autonomous shadow. In his poem, Call Me by My True Names, Zen poet and teacher Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, "My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom all over the earth. My pain is like a river of tears, so vast it fills the four oceans." Where and how do we express that river of tears? How does the body express it creatively? Here, Ty does it through poetry. Movie director Guillermo del Toro described the making of his most recent film, Frankenstein, based on the original story by Mary Shelley. It's out just now in time for Halloween. As he reflected, we all have such secret tragedies in us, things that we haven't shared sometimes with anybody. We keep them in, and art purges them out. Art allows you to look at them and cry or laugh. We don't know how it happens, but it happens. An artist does this with his paintbrush, like Picasso did here in this large painting on the screen. This is Guernica, and he painted this after the Nazi attack on the town of Guernica during the Spanish War, when Guernica, you know, Franco said, "Yeah, you can use it as a training ground. You can go for it, see if it works." And they bombed all of these people. There's an anecdote that goes with this. When one of the Nazi officers came into Picasso's studio once, he looked at the painting and studied it a long time, and he said, "Did you do this?" And Picasso looked at him and he goes, "No, no, you did." Great story. Recently, a Spanish singer and activist opened a concert with a line that was poetry born from grief. I'm translating from Spanish to English. "In the days that the earth cries and the children are buried without names, we raise our voices like the barricades are raised, with rage and hope. Here it is, the earth herself who cries for the children. Here is the power of the voice to express both grief and rage, not for vengeance, as she notes in the song, but for justice. This kind of expression that separates grief and even rage born in love from grievance that feeds hate and tyranny. That's a really important distinction. Expressing our grief creatively tends the soul, and it can be done in myriad ways. Of course, our actions, kindness, the volunteering, all of that, but the grief that's in the body. So journaling, collage, and a ritual art. It is a crucial step in addressing our psychological constitution, on which so much rests, as Jung points out in this Kairos moment. Like the gods, we must be willing to gather in circles in our communities in this darkness between worlds, to make the necessary sacrifices, to do both the inner and outer work, to conjure an imagination deep enough and wide enough, to muster the courage, curiosity, and creativity collectively, to birth a new sun and just, kind, green new world into being. There are many roads to these ends. In Jungian depth psychology, the inner work begins with a commitment to the individuation journey. Our personal evolution to wholeness, not perfection, which begins with facing our shadows. both personal and collective. We usually don't. Nobody wants to, especially our country. Countries begin banning books and tearing down, taking down paintings. Jung described the shadows because the shadow is it's really big buzzword. So I'm going to give it to you from a Jungian perspective. Jung described the shadow as a tight passage, a narrow door, whose painful constriction no one is spared, who goes down to the deep well. When unaddressed, these dark, hidden wounds, buried and forgotten, become complexes which take on a life of their own. As Jung found, and they say in the body too, as Jung found, we avoid facing our shadow at all costs. Yet when no effort is made to integrate the shadow, it is projected outwards. Think jealousy or envy. Those are completely autonomous, right? Like all of a sudden, they sort of take over. When the shadow is collective, countries go to war, at times even with themselves. As Jung noted, and these are his words, the collective shadow manifests when societies project unintegrated fears onto marginalized groups, amplifying tyranny. And as he pointed out, until the unconscious is brought to consciousness, we call it fate. And so the destructive cycles continue. In this vein, it is the role of Jungian and archetypal depth psychology to bring what is in the darkness to the light of day. So to wrap it up, for those who wish to gather to grieve collectively, I recommend doing it in ritual on a new moon, in a safe, soundproof space where neighbors don't fear the worst and call 911 on you. Remember, the taboo and the fear that the llanto conjures is real. And in a world as violent as ours, it is understandable. Consecrate the grounds first. And if you can, gather near a body of water where you will have privacy. I saw a woman the other day screaming into the ocean. Ocean is nice and loud. At the end with the creation myth. Creation myths have a unique power to give birth anew to our lives and communities, to the world, and even to the gods themselves. And lastly, for those who wish to go deeper, to explore harnessing the power of the llanto itself, the wailing, the acts as an omen and a call to consciousness that warns not only of the end of the world as we know it, but at the same time heralds the birth of a new one. I recommend ritual retreat. It's powerful. These are powerful realms. La Llorona wanders in those in between realms, and so the retreat allows you to be grounded, to open, and yet be grounded, to recuperate, regroup at the end. Contact me if you'd like me to facilitate or join my mailing list, and I'll let you know when one is happening. People are going back and forth across the door sill where the two worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. Thank you. So I'd like to open it up now for any questions or reflections. I don't know if it's Kelly or Kristen. There you are. Hi, Kristen.
Hello. Thank you so much, Sandra. That was fantastic.
Oh, great. I'm glad you liked it. Thank you.
Yes, if anybody has any questions, you could place them in the chat or raise your hand.
Raise your hand, yeah. Don't be afraid. I'm always one to write in the chat, but then as when I'm presenting, I'm not always one to look at the chat to see if there's questions there. But it is great to have people ask questions. We have Amanda's hand is raised. Okay, can you see?
Oh yeah, thank you. Sorry, I was just trying to unmute.
Okay, okay, great. I
No,
don't.
not so much a question, just more of a reflection. I just loved this presentation, and I really appreciate just all the imagery and just everything that you put into it. And I just really has me thinking about like the role that Jungian analysis or Jungian depth psychology really uh, could have or play in like big world issues and just our collective problems, especially right now because there's so much projection. Um, and yeah, so just wanted to just thank you so much for this.
Great, great. I'm glad to hear it, and I agree. Jennifer Selig, she's Dr. Jennifer Selig. She taught for years at Pacifica Graduate Institute where I studied, and she always said there should be like a maybe a team of Jungian archetypal transpersonal depth psychologists working with there should be a department for them in terms of the political flow. I don't know, to me, I think that it certainly has a role. I mean, in helping to bring consciousness, and I think it does need to grow, and we all have our role in it and path to take. But yeah, thank you. I'm doing my best.
Great, thank you. It looks like we did have some questions come up in the chat. We have a question from Kellen. I am someone new to processing grief through art. As a child-free woman, are there mythological archetypes I can look to? What was the role of child-free women in Mesoamerica? Gracias.
That's a really good question. And it's not one that I've explored. When I think of child-free women, I'm sorry to say I go to Greek mythology, but I think of Athena, goddess of civilization, and Artemis. And when we think of somebody like Athena, Athena, in essence, she sprouted from her father Zeus's head. Her mother, Thetis, was, her name meant wise counsel. So Athena came in fully armed, strategic. She was a warrior. She became, she was voted in by the people of Athens to become the patron. That's why it's Athens. What did she bring? She brought as a goddess of civilization, she brought the olive tree, which brought olive oil, which brought light for the lanterns, which brought trade, which brought shade, which brought a way of life that otherwise wouldn't have been possible. Athena created democracy, the first court by the people. Athena, she only went to war to defend the polis, to defend the people, the town. She was all about justice. And to me, that's a that's a power. She's a powerful archetype, and I know she made some mistakes. She got real mad at Medusa, and made Medusa. But all the gods and goddesses have a negative, a creative and destructive side. They represent psychological wholeness. They're light and dark, just like we see it in nature, rain and dryness. And that is an image of psychological wholeness. We are light and dark. We're conscious and unconscious. Um, Artemis, we think about, guardian of of the woods, of the earth, of the deer. There's a lot of fabulous, feminine archetypes all throughout. And now you've given me an assignment. I have to have to look for one in Mesoamerican mythology. I'm constantly searching. So thanks for that question. But yeah, I recommend looking into your roots and looking into the Greek mythology. But there's a lot of wonderful feminine archetypes that we need to mine their wisdom, bring them to life. So there's a few hands raised here. So Nita, do you want to unmute?
Yes, I just did, Sandra. Thank you so much. That was such a beautiful, beautiful lecture. It just gave me the goosebumps. And it was very timely because this Wednesday I am leaving for Oaxaca City to attend the Dia de los Muertos celebration. So it is just gave a whole new context, and something you and I have in common is that we are both from countries. I'm from India that were colonized, and the female deities are a big part of our mythology and culture. And so getting the Mesoamerican perspective on it was very helpful for me. And in the past I have made trips to our South and Central American neighbors. I have just invented themes of Aztecs, Incas, and Mayas and made those trips. And so this is just kind of added to that, knowledge base that I've been trying to cultivate. So I just wanted to thank you. I really didn't have a question, but just wanted to say it's such a timely, lecture for my upcoming trip.
Oh, I'm so glad. It's wonderful to hear that you're going to Oaxaca for the Day of the Dead. I lived in Michoacan. I lived in Mexico for 15 years, but I lived in Michoacan, where also the Day of the Dead is an amazing, numinous experience. You'll have a wonderful time just, I mean, entering into that enchantment. It is a numinous experience, and I'm glad that you came today. When you said that you're from India, I know um, a depth psychologist from India who is just now beginning to do her work on the Indian deities and mythologies through the Jungian lens. Priyanka Gupta. If you're interested, leave me your.
I shall look her up. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. She's just in the process, but she's starting to do conferences and stuff. She just reached out a while ago. I was really excited about that. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, but it's just the power of Shakti, or the energy, which has a feminine, and Shiva, who is, so in each of us we have the Shiva and the Shakti, you know what I mean? And that's what kind of forms the universe. And so getting, your perspective was so very important to me. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Nita. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Jay Subsinski, can you unmute?
Yes. Thanks so much. Thank you, Sandra. So my question is, if you ever see clients or women kind of fall fate to the La Llorona archetype, or if we can view it as a complex, I was almost chilled to the bone just when you talked about women inhabiting this liminal space between life and death, especially in postpartum phases. It's something I've seen in my caseload, and I just wonder I wonder if you could have any advice for how to hold space for someone going through that, and if there's a path we can guide them to. Thanks so much.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I do recommend my first season 1 of my Blue Medicine Journal. I work specifically with the whole season practically turned into postpartum blues and postpartum psychosis, and I work La Llorona a lot. She is a wonderful, and I've basically deepened this work with La Llorona has been ongoing. It is a llamada, it is a calling, and because that is a profound space, and in our patriarchal culture, it's not a profound rite of passage giving birth. We are just like, considered hysterical, and we're the object of comedy. It's just hilarious watching us scream and yell on TV commercials, or, it's just such a disrespected, rite of passage. It's like we've been ridiculed, and just the whole health system, the whole patriarchal structure is beyond belief for the birthing woman. I mean, for women in general, like I said, the myth of Eve, basically written by the Deuteronomy priests, disappeared the divine feminine. And women have been, subservient, second-class citizens ever since, and suspect and shamed and just anything and everything. And so that space, I, as a ritual artist, I've facilitated the blessing way ceremony for women that are pregnant in their 8th month, but that's a ritual. And that's the point of all of I have 3 children. They were all born at home. I had, and I've been facilitating ritual for birthing women. That's what I recommend, is that, the myth, bring myth, whatever their heritage, but bringing myth, like I say, Jungian depth psychology is mythologically informed. So you want to bring myth, and I'm a ritual artist. So those are what I'm going to say. As a Jungian and depth psychologist, it's myth and ritual art. The blessing way ceremony in the 8th month is beautiful. To keep, those 40 days after a woman gives birth in Mexico, in many villages, it's still the custom that she gets sweat lodges, specific herbs, atoles, the corn gruels are specific to her, that nurture her back into the earthly realm, because she is, literally in between worlds. When I say birthing women can change weather, I know it because physically it happened to me in all 3 of my births. And back in the day when I gave birth, floods were not easy. We're not common like they are now, but every single one of them, my children, there was a flood. It started when I was literally in labor. It's a powerful time, and it has to be acknowledged as such. They have to be, there has to be, to me, the sweat lodges. I mean, of course, it depends on their doctors, their beliefs, everything, whether it's a sweat lodge or just, the blessing way ceremonies, but ritual, and then the diet. And then I stayed home. I did the yogic tradition of the 21 days after my kids were born, and I stayed at home. Not everybody willing to do that. I found that, this is my opinion. I think that women sort of get misguided, and they want to prove how badass they are. They're out in the mall the next day. There's nothing as sacred as a newborn, or you that have just given that birth. Just stay home and enjoy it. If you can. It's difficult in our patriarchal structure, in the corporate fantasy. Anyway, I hope I answered. And you can reach out to me. Go to the Blue Medicine Journal podcast. It's on Apple and Spotify, but also reach out to me at Blue Medicine Journal. You can find me on Instagram and stuff if you have questions or want to explore that further. You there? We lost him. Anna, can you unmute, Anna? Anna, you there?
Yes, I'm unmuting. Okay, there we go. I'm hitting the button. Is it working?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah, I had more of a comment and then just wanted to get some reaction. I accidentally ended up at the island of La Llorona in Mexico City, like unexpectedly. And it was funny because me and my mom were like trying to avoid, the island of the dolls and all that. And then here we are. And there was a statue in the middle, and she was being venerated. And I was like, wait a minute, this is as I know it, this is a woman who went hysterical and killed her kids, right? Like, you're not supposed to, she's not supposed to be a figure of, that you, like a saint, like somebody that you worship. And yet here they were, and here she was, and people were going and putting different, offerings to her. And what I also thought was interesting was that they were positive and negative requests, so to speak. And I just thought, like, wow, so it almost feels like she can be anything to anyone. I mean, within the range of what you were talking about, right? But as someone who doesn't have children, I was really moved. So the story in her presence of the actual, like what you were saying with birth, that doesn't necessarily resonate with me because it's not an experience I've had. But what resonated with me is when the guide started saying one of the original stories that they believed. And it changed the context of this woman who wasn't just crying for her children, she was crying for all of us, because she was someone who was born of the indigenous people, and then the conquistadors came and she had these two kids. There was all sorts of questions about how the kids died, but however it is, the kids died. And so she's crying for all of us who are mixed blood. And when I was there, I was like, can you help me deal with this shame? Because I'm 100% Mexican, 50-50, like half of people who are indigenous, half of people who are from Spain. And growing up in America, I know I'm not the only one who carries the shame of not being seen as enough, Latina enough. And when I posted about it, and I shared, just in case people are on Instagram, but I shared a story about it and I shared it on TikTok, hundreds of comments of people who feel the same way and who were just blown away that she wasn't just some hysterical woman who killed her kids. And again, I was seeing like her impact and coming through all of these comments. And that's part of why I'm here, because I was like, wait, she's so many things. She's so many things. And I love that you said that she's not only just the harbinger of, oh, something bad is coming. It's also the birth of a nation. Like, just mind blown, basically. I just wanted to share that story and kind of get your reaction to that.
Oh my God, I'm so glad that you shared. I haven't been to the island of La Llorona, and I'm going to Mexico in February. I'll be in Mexico City for a couple of days. So I'm going to go now. Also, what is your, if you don't mind sharing or put it in the chat or something, I'd love to look at your TikTok. I'd like to see what you wrote about La Llorona, because as I say, this will be part of this is part of my research, ongoing research. So I'd love to see your images, if you have images from the island and stuff, because now I'm going to have to go. I'm going to go to Patlique, I'm going to go to the big, the museums and everything. I'm also going to Frida Kahlo's Casa Azul, but I totally resonate with you on the not being Latina enough. It's an amazing thing. Mexicans are mestizos anyway. You know what I mean? My father was 100% Purépecha. And my mother's Scotch, Irish, French. But my mother, back when my mother married my father, it was illegal in this country. Basically she had to, she moved to Mexico and she became Mexican, and the world that she was raised around, all of her, we were always raised in with the Mexican families. And so I was very bummed out when I moved to Mexico and I was treated like the gringa. I realized at that point it was sort of like a California mestiza, because I feel that, there's just like such a richness when we share cultures. Maybe we're not, pure Mexicana, because we weren't born there, but it's innate part of our culture, and so we're blended. We're also from this country. I think, just to me, I think that's what makes the world so rich. It's just the different cultures. I was thinking recently about this idea of a melting pot. I don't think it should be a melting pot. I don't think we should melt. I think we can blend, we can share, we can, but to me, I always think, I remember a Mexican friend of mine saying, soy más mexicana que tus huaraches, I'm more Mexican than your huaraches. And nobody can take that. We can be judged maybe because we don't look a certain way, or, our experience is different, or whatever, but, nadie me lo quita. It's just the way that goes. I'm as Mexican as they come, but I am a Mexican California mestiza. I identify that with California, a Mexican sun worshipping California mestiza. A ver qué tal. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for sharing.
It looks like Anna put the link in the chat for her TikTok.
Great.
And then we have a couple other questions in the chat, but also a comment from Jay, who had asked a question. Jay says, thank you. It sounds like a takeaway is that when the collective disrespects the feminine in us has the potential to show back the face we show it. One way to get someone out of the La Llorona complex is to return to honoring the feminine through ritual and worship.
I like that. Yeah, that's I mean, it's time, I think, and you can feel the divine feminine, the feminine rising. It's we're so out of balance. Look at the Anthropocene, which is so incredibly out of balance. It's just, and with the imagination and the power of the imagination, this is our garden. The Aztecs, the Mexica people, they had a mythic homeland. I mean, it gets almost, we like we did with the Bible, we literalize everything, concretize, and then it turns into tyranny. But to have a dream of what the earth can be, we got to have that dream. We got to have that imagination. We have to imagine it, because if we don't imagine it, and imagination, Henri Corbin, the French philosopher who studied Sufism, he was like this amazing scholar, and he found that the heart is the seat of the imagination, and that it thinks in images. We have to imagine. Joanna Macy, may she rest in peace, she said, we cannot give birth to what we have not first cherished in our hearts. What's it look like? What's that new world look like? Because other people have plans, they're already making them. Thank you. Angela, you have your hand raised, so you can go ahead and unmute.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for everything you've been saying and teaching. This has been amazing and so timely as these seasons of change. I was wondering, should we be focusing? I'm like from my ancestors come from the Bern Canton, Switzerland area. So should I be focusing on myths that are kind of based in those regions? Okay, I'm currently reading like Women Who Run with the Wolves, and like
That's great. Yeah.
it's so good. There's so many amazing stories. But yeah, I think that was my question. Should we, as we're wanting to do shadow work and wanting to work with story, should we be focusing on stories that come from ancestral
100%.
lands?
100%. The more the merrier. That's the beauty of our planet. If myth is the language of the soul, that brings order to the inner chaos and its outward manifestations, then the more the merrier. It ripples out, from the personal unconscious to the collective unconscious. We need it. So yeah, awaken those old gods, their potentials, forces within, styles and qualities of consciousness. Yes, please do, and read all of them. I mean, Clarissa Pinkola Estes, I read her when that book first came out and changed my life. She was the first Jungian I ever read, and it was like, wow, okay, yes. More stories. It's good. It's important. And thank you.
Yes, thank you. Looks like another question from the chat from Rhonda. Do you think Cassandra of Troy was a related archetype, unheeded prophecies before the Trojan civilization was destroyed?
Wow, I think I love this question, and I think it deserves. I would say so, of course, but because Greece there was also patriarchal. I think that I've never considered it before, but I think it's a wonderful question and a wonderful pursuit, and worth delving into. I like it. I think, again, like I said, these things, they just start rising, from our personal and collective unconscious. They come up, and it's a good question. And it's again, worldviews make all the difference in the world, how the divine feminine is viewed, and how we as women, or those that are women or feminine identified, are treated. So good question.
Great. Thank you, Rhonda. And one more question from Christine. I'm curious about themes related to this archetype coming up in dreams. I don't have children, but I have had dreams in the past where I am holding a small baby and trying to protect it, escape from some kind of danger, etc.
You know, those are really important dreams. I'm going to be doing just in a couple of weeks in November, mid-November, I'm doing what's called Blue Dreams Cafe. So I recommend that you join that if you're interested in talking more about dreams. Dreams, like myth, are the language of the soul, you know, and they can be riddles and metaphoric at all times and not taken literally. But a baby is new life, isn't it? So the baby can be a new project, a new calling, you know, to dedicate yourself to and to take care of, you know. So consider the baby in that dream the metaphor for something new that wants to be born in you, that needs tending to. Does that make sense?
More comment? Oh, yeah, Christine says thank you. Thank you, Christine.
Okay, is that it?
Does anybody have any other questions? And feel free to raise your hand.
Okay.
It says thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thanks everybody for coming. I really appreciate it. I like the questions. I always like the dialogue. I'm working on a book. This will be part of it, on Mesoamerican mythology, philosophy, and cosmovision. You know, very much with the idea in this Kairos moment to draw from the ancient, to give birth to the ancient and new time, and be part of that creation as we, you know, straddle this darkness between worlds.
That sounds like a fantastic project, Sandra. I think we'll all be looking forward to that very much. So very much needed at this time as well. So
tend your grief, tend your souls all. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks, Kristen and Kelly and all PRS for putting this together.